The following presentation was recorded live in Los Angeles, California for the 24th Annual Convention of the International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape 14, Timing and Musical Phrasing in Class.
My name is John Kaltenthaler. I'm the moderator for this session. It is on timing, smooth dancing, and body flow in class. And my other panelist on this is Larry Davenport. Larry Davenport is a devout trader. He used to be in Pennsylvania. I had him as a person with whom I worked very closely. We did dances together. We sang together. Had a great time. And I said, geez, I got somebody I can turn my clubs over to when I get ready to retire. And then he got promoted to a position in Genentech in Foster City, California, and he left us. I was devastated, and I still am. But in any case, Larry Davenport has been calling for about 13 years, and he does a fine job, and he and I are going to be talking to you about timing in class and body flow in class and how to teach the dancers to recognize and feel the difference in body flow. And if you think that you're not for that session...
I just want to test the tape to make sure it's coming.
Okay. So if you think you're at some other session, why, we're just giving you a chance to bail out before anybody gets embarrassed by having to leave in the middle of it. We gave you one handout, and that has a topic of timing, and I think it's important that we all get on it. It's right on the chair there. If somebody would make sure, if you need a copy of it, either pick it up or hold up your hand. We'll have somebody give it to you. Also, I'd like to mention that anytime you have a question, I would like you to use the portable mic, and I need somebody who would like to be a volunteer, Rick, to hand this out if people have a question. If you sit there and you hold out in your hot little hand, then we want any questions that we have on the tape itself. And a couple of reasons we say that. There are people who buy these tapes, and they get very annoyed if there's periods of silence while someone says, well, I can project. Yes, you can project, and the people in the room can hear you, but the tape can't. So we do ask your indulgence, and please put all your questions on tape. How many of you think you're pretty good at timing? How many of you think that's a trick question? That's what you're probably going to say. Okay. There are three elements to timing. They are command time, lead time, and execution time. Command time is the physical amount of time it takes you to give the command. Head square through, right and left through, touch quarter, scoot back, whatever the commands happen to be. Generally, that's 2 beats. How do you do that? How do you develop that in your repertoire as an individual caller? You take any record that you want, and you take any list that you're working with, and you give the commands without regard to the choreographic effect so that you can deliver all of those commands in 2 beats. Are all square dance commands able to be delivered in 2 beats? No. There is not a caller around who can give spin, chain, and exchange the gears in 2 beats and have the dancers understand it. Okay? But generally speaking, what are the important words in spin, chain, exchange the gears? Spin chain tells them basically what they're going to do, and exchange the gears can be in beats 3 and 4, if you will, because that they're going to be using up some time before they need to hear the rest of that portion of the call. So that's command time. Lead time is perhaps the biggest variable that we have. That is the time before you expect the dancers to begin execution that you deliver the command. Command time and lead time may both occupy the same 2 beats, but sometimes we need to give further advance warning, and we will vary the lead time. How many of you were in the last session that Gloria did? Gloria Rios. Okay. She probably talked about the use of walk and dodge and a partner trade. When you give that, if you give the command with proper timing, the partner trade, the walk and dodge for the ladies' part, is a lunge and recover. But if the timing is bad, it's a terrible flow. Just like chase right is a terrible call to use for the girls if you do it pass through and chase right, because it's a total reversal of direction. So one of the things that we want to do is to understand the body mechanics. Gloria refers to this as the kinesiology of the call. Does she use that word for you too? Yeah, I can even spell it, so it's okay. But anyhow, you have to understand the nature of the call and how do we overcome things which are inherently bad. Square through has got some inherently bad features to the call because the natural tendency for the body is to turn in the opposite direction that you wish to turn. The man pulls by the right, he's going to turn to the right. But the lady pulls by the right, she wants to turn to the right, and she has to turn to the left. When the man pulls by with the left, he wants to turn left, but the call requires him to turn right. That's the definition of the call. But we're dealing here and primarily not in the analysis of the body mechanics, the kinesiology, but rather how do we adjust the calls, how do we adjust the combinations which are going to enable it to be smooth. And part of the way we do that is to give the lead time so the dancers know what's coming next. Walk and dodge and a partner trade, if we give that a little bit earlier, they know that the ladies are going to lunge and recover, and it becomes much smoother to dance it that way. How many of you use the commands star through and veer left? Anybody in this room? You're all pure as saints, right? Good. I'm glad to see the Liars Club is alive and well here in Los Angeles today. I have a big argument with my wife on this because she said, it's okay. And I will maintain that it is really not okay, but if the callers give the command time and the lead time, star through and veer left, again, it is a lunge and recover. But if you wait or just a little bit late in giving that command, you star through, you stop, and then you reverse the direction, and it's a terrible body flow for the ladies. One of the things we as callers must do is examine what we're asking the dancers to do, not just for the actives, but for everybody in the square. A number of singing calls used to have a figure similar to this. Think as a head couple, either the ladies or the gents, it makes no difference. Head square through, swing through, centers run, couples circulate, wheel and deal, pass through, trade by, swing corner. Not bad flow for the heads, is it? Everybody agree that that's reasonable flow? Think as a side person. Head square through 4. Swing through, okay. Centers run, okay. Couples circulate, oops. Wheel and deal, now we're going to a smaller circle. Pass through and trade by, we eventually are going to disappear, aren't we? We're going into smaller and smaller concentric circles. And yet, that's been done several times in extremely popular singing calls. Good for the heads or good for the actives, terrible for the others, wasn't it? So that's the thing we have to do when we're dealing with timing and smooth dancing and body flow. The third aspect of timing is the aspect of execution time. I don't know how many of you have the timing the basic program sheet that CALLERLAB makes up. How many of you have seen that or have that in your files? If you don't have one, write the office and tell them that you want a sheet with the timing of the basic and mainstream programs. Those sheets were developed with a long period of time physically dancing the moves. That effort was pioneered by Dick Ledger and Bob Wilson and Melton Luttrell in conjunction with the styling. And these things have been proven over the time that from the time they give the call and the continuity of action with the dancers dancing to the beat of the music, how many steps it physically takes to execute a move. Is it essential that you know exact number of steps that all these moves take? Yeah, it really is. Should you be teaching the dancers how many steps it takes to do a thing? Yeah, you should. When you teach a lady's chain, as a for instance, you teach it as it takes 4 beats from a static square. It takes 4 beats to cross and 4 beats to courtesy turn. That's how we arrived at the 8-beat call. If we're doing it from something other than a static square, it may take less if the dancers are closer together to start with, same as the right and left through. But if we're teaching a ladies' chain and we teach the dancers to do it in 8 beats, we're teaching them to dance to the music. If some of the dancers are younger, they might be able to complete it in 6 beats. And if they're extremely athletic, they may be able to complete it in 3 beats. But we call that a ladies' lunge, and we're trying to teach them ladies' chain. And the point that we're trying to make there is, let's teach them to dance. Let's teach them the feel of the dance and the feel of the flow. And if we do that in our jobs as callers, the dancers won't be saying, "Is this watch still running?" and put it up to their ear, because they're going to be exhausted. There are several factors which we'll talk a little bit about later that deal with stop and go timing and clipped timing or rush timing. And then we'll show you some of the things and features of choreography which will show the dancers how to feel the flow of the music. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, we're going to move on to the portion of the presentation that Larry's going to talk about, and he has a rather extensive presentation to make, and then we'll give you some examples of music, and we'll give you some examples, and maybe we'll even get a square. So if we ask for a square, please let us quickly get 4 girls and 4 guys up there. Okay? Larry?
Thank you, John. I don't know if I can live up to that preamble you gave with regard to my moving west. This isn't quite a session on understanding timing as a caller, and it's not quite a session on how to teach a dancer. It's a little bit of a hybrid of both. If you understand that timing and smooth flow results in comfortable, enjoyable dancing for a dancer, then you have to start and think, well, how does a dancer dance smoothly to good timing and smooth flow? Part of it is that it's just a bit of a natural thing to do if you watch dancers, but is it a natural thing to do for a dancer who comes in the door on the first night? And I think I would say that the answer to that is probably not. At the same time, you look through your definition lists and you set up to what is the definition of a call, how are you going to teach the call, what order are you going to teach the calls in if you're going to deviate a little bit from the published teaching order that you have, or any of those kinds of considerations. You might get down the list and start to think about, well, styling is part of what I need to put in there. I'm not sure if every caller really thinks about the fact, well, timing's got to be in there as part of it too, and I'm going to talk about some of these things a little bit. I think most of us think that there's a difference between class timing, what I'll call class timing, and club timing. Ideally, if you've got a group of square dancers who are already trained, they're enjoying themselves at a club dance, and you are adept at calling a well-timed dance, you can just sort of lay back, let go, and using the elements that John just talked about with regard to the command and then the execution, the delivery time and the execution time, you can watch those dancers go through that smoothly. If you step out on the floor for the first night of class and you've got a bunch of people who are there and they're coming in the door, you're probably not, well, first of all, they don't know the moves yet, but even if as you start to teach it, it's unlikely that you're just going to zip right through this thing and expect them to come on down the line and do it with you. There's going to be a fair amount of stop and go. So how do you think about that? Well, that's part of what I'd like to talk about a little bit. There's a lot of things, before I really expand on that a little bit, there are lots of things that you think about besides timing. And I think in listening to John, you'll see that you can't think of timing in a vacuum. We start out talking about timing, and very soon we're into talking about flow. Very soon we're starting to talk about music. We're starting to talk about, well, how fast should the music be, or how slow should the music be for comfortable dancing. I think is it still currently accepted about 124 to 128 beats is pretty much still considered smooth dancing beat.
Yep. How many of you, by the way, ever use an electronic metronome? If you're not familiar with it, they make these little things and they print out. You can hear that thing beep beeping, but it has a digital printout that says this is 128. You got to calibrate your ear, because if you increase the speed of this, you try to dance to that. If you try to dance to that speed, what's going to happen to your dancers? They're going to be getting a heart attack, aren't they? So we say that we recommend that you dance using a tempo of 124 to 128. Used to be that we dance everything at 132. If you try to dance 132 today, unless you have a very young group, you're going to drive them nuts. You really are, because they're not going to be able to keep up. So tempo becomes an important aspect. Are tempo and timing the same? No way. But they are related.
Yeah, just as an illustration of that, if you are moving that music too fast and you're up there at the 132 John is telling you about, you're rushing your dancers. If you're down somewhere significantly below 124, your dancers are plodding through it. If you just set your music one place and leave it there, and you start calling faster to slower music, that does not exactly make up for the slower music. That just results in bad timing because you're not with your music. If you've got that record going fast and you try to call a little bit slower to compensate, but you didn't deal with the speed of that record, you still are missing the boat there, because you're now you're missing your timing again because you're just not with the music. So you have to balance these two things. You've got to set the music to the right speed that's going to be comfortable for the dancers, and then you've got to deliver your calls with that music so it's a comfortable dancing experience.
How many of you think that tempo is inherently automatic to everybody's body? Hold up your hands. Okay, let me tell you that I do. I was in the military for a number of years. And in the military, there are a lot of times they don't have field exercises in December, and there are a lot of September babies in the military. I'm not sure why that is. But in any case, there are parades with military bands. And every time you have a parade with a military band and you have a pregnant gal there, she will feel the baby kicking in time with the beat of that band. Before they're born, they understand tempo. Before they are born, they understand rhythm. And for those of you who have been pregnant and had a band go by, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because the babies feel the beat. Dancers will try to dance to the beat of the music if we will only stay out of their way.
So just to continue on the subject of timing and the speed of the music, the tempo of the music, if you will, you have a couple of choices when you're thinking about what you're going to use when that new class comes in the door. You can slow down your music because they're not going to be moving as fast. That's one way to adjust. You can slow down your calling to allow them more time to think about it as you're going through the initial phases of these people learning it. I think you might find that in certain cases you do certainly have to keep in mind adjusting the tempo of the record, because you're going to have to adjust it to the group you've got that particular night, that particular floor, slippery or not slippery, rug or not rug, or whatever else you have. But I don't think that you want to necessarily adjust that record down simply because that's the way you want to give dancers more time to learn, because somewhere down the line, that's not the tempo that the rest of the square dance world is dancing at. And so it's not really fair to teach them to dance slower, and then all of a sudden they graduate from class. And guess what, guys? Everybody else is doing it slightly different. So how do you get them from first night to graduation and they're feeling like they're dancing? One of the things I think of is, and I'll skip to that part and come back, but I think a bit to how do you program your class in terms of that, to take some of these things into account. And then I'll come back to a few other things. You want to have a balance between review. You want to have a balance between teaching new calls. You want to have a balance of not only in that review where you've used it as workshop time to help increase the skills that these people have with some of the calls that they're just learning, but you want to have a review with regard to their beginning to be able to dance to that music smoothly with good timing, thinking of being able to dance through that. And so I think of it when I start a class or go through it, I'm going to look at three stages really of an evening if you think about it. First stage of the evening, and I'm past the first night at the moment because we've already, I'm assuming that we've already taught them something. But the first, depending on if you've got your 2 hours set aside for a class, that first tip that you've got set up, it probably isn't a real great idea to be your new teach tip of the night. People are coming in the door and they want to relax, and you're going to give them material that they're fairly familiar with. If you've got plenty of time, maybe that first tip is material they're very familiar with, and so you can concentrate on letting them dance, and you can concentrate on terms of what kind of timing that you're using with regard to that class, and be able to give them a dancing experience. experience. That first tip, or maybe into that second tip, you're doing some review of stuff that you've taught in the weeks before or preceding week. There may be a little bit of workshop that you have to do as you reinforce what some of those people have learned at that point. And so you're not going to be able, at that point, you're going to let your timing aspect of things go. You're going to be a little bit more stop and go. And I think I better step back and make sure that we're all on the same page with regard to definitions. When I say stop and go, if you're consistently giving that dancer more execution time than they need for a call before you give them the next call, they've got to stop at that point and wait for your next call. And then you get the next call. And so if you look at a floor that's dancing to a stop and go kind of a delivery of timing, they're going to complete a move, and if you're really bad, they'll stand up, they'll look up at you and say, what's next? And wonder if you forgot where you are in the record. If you're not too bad, they're just kind of sort of lurch, go, and that kind of thing. And so for a dancing experience at a regular dance, at least to me, that doesn't seem like a real desirable dancing experience. And I think that comes back to one of the things John talked about in terms of, boy, this is a long evening, and boy, am I exhausted. It's just not that much fun. But there are times when you have to think about those things. In a class situation where you're working with people that don't have the real comfortable knowledge yet of the call that they're learning, giving them a little bit extra time to think about it doesn't seem like such a bad thing to me. You can give them a little bit of that time. One of the things I think about when you think about dancers learning a dance, and I think back to when I learned to dance, the first way you learn a call is with your head. You got to think that thing through. Somewhere that gets translated to your feet, and you start not thinking about it so much, and you've like learned a new word in a language, and you just sort of execute it. Somebody says right and left through. Do you think about it? No, you just do it. You take a call, you get angels in a class setting, for instance, and you're teaching new people and you're trying to break it down into the pieces. Who has the worst time? The people that don't know the call yet, or the people that do know the call? Yeah, I think so. So what I'm saying is, and to think about it takes more time, doesn't it? I mean, if you've got to think about it, if you've got a caller there that's just giving you exactly the time that you need to execute those calls, and you're at a point where you've still got to think about it in your head, what's happening to that floor? That floor is getting a little bit shaky out there. Not only are they getting a little bit shaky, but I think they're getting a little frustrated. I think the fun element, which is what we're all looking for in terms of what the square dancers are experiencing from night one of a class, the fun element isn't quite there. And so at that point, if you allow them a little extra time, if your timing is maybe a little bit more stop and go in that sense, but it's not stop and go because you're making a mistake at that point. It's stop and go because you're using that as a teaching aid. But if you never do anything else in a class setting but stop and go, what do those dancers think the way the dance is by the time they get out of class? Right. And so in those first tips of that evening that I was talking about, when you are having your chance to review with those people and shop with those people, your timing may be pretty choppy, but you're allowing for these people to have time to think about those calls, and you're allowing these people to have a chance for success. And so they don't, you may think that it's terribly stop and go. Do you think your new dancers that are busy thinking about that material are thinking that it's stop and go out on the floor? Some of them are out there saying, boy, is he fast. I wish he'd slow down. I didn't get it yet. Some of your faster learners are out there saying, gee, I've got a lot of extra time here. I wonder what I should do with it. But that's just the nature of a class setting that you've got to take that into account. Once you've gotten through that phase of your evening, there's going to be that period of time when you're going to be teaching new calls. And so then you're down, now we're just talking about the walkthrough stage and all that type of thing, and the first sequences that you go through to help them learn and that type of thing. So timing is not the first thing on your mind at that point. Getting the definitions down is one thing on your mind. But there's an aspect of timing, not how you deliver the calls, but there's certainly an aspect of timing that should be part of what you're thinking about that time. It comes back to what John was saying earlier about the list with regard to the timing. If you as a caller not only know the definition of that call, but you know how many beats of time it takes to complete the call, and you're instructing the dancers on how to do that, then they're going to get the idea of what it means to dance from the first night. If you tell them how to do a right and left through, but don't really tell them that you've got 8 beats in order to complete that, or the ladies' chain, and you don't bother to tell them or instruct them that they've got the time to relax and just move to the music, how else are they going to learn to move to the music? So even in your your walkthrough and that type of thing, you can certainly take that into account. Once you've gotten through that portion of the evening, what I think about in the last tip or two of the evening is just let the dancers dance and have fun. But part of that is to start taking for the material, if you pick material for that part of the evening, which is material that they're more familiar with at that point, not the material that they just learned that night, for instance, or the material that they're really still thinking about, but some of that material that has already made its way to the feet. At that point, you as a caller can think a little bit more in terms of, now what I'm really doing while they're having fun is I'm allowing them to get the experience of what it means to actually dance to the music as opposed to this lurch, stop type of thing.
When we talk about calling to the music and letting the dancers feel the music, how many of you let the dancers use the first beat of music, or how many of you take that first beat for yourself? You all know the difference between that? Which do you prefer to dance to? Where the caller gives you the first beat of the music? How many of you can do that consistently in singing calls? None of you? How many of you have ever tried to do that with patter calls? It's a lot tougher with patter calls than it is with singing calls. Larry, just stick that on for just a second, would you? This first record that I'm going to put on is a thing called Back Home Again. It's on Silver Sounds. Yeah. And I just want you to hear the difference of how I call that, where I take the first beat for myself and where I give the dancers the first beat. Up a little. Circle left, there's a storm across the valley. All the clouds are drifting in. Left alley man, do sado, men star left hand inside. Turn partner by the right, left alley man. Swing your girl and all promenade. And hey, it's good to be back home again. Now I'll take the first beat for myself. Head square through to count to 4. Swing through. Boys run, couples circulate. Ladies, you chain down the line and keep them straight. Star through and then you pass through. Trade by swing, all promenade. Sounds okay, doesn't it? Let's get a square up here quickly, can we? Can we quickly get a square up? Because I want you to feel the difference. What do we need here? We need one more loose guy to go with a loose woman there. Chuck, we need you. We need 2 guys there. We need one more guy. Okay, we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to give you the first beat to dance on, and I'm not going to call anything that you really need to rehearse for. Okay, Larry, please. Trust me. You all do dance the mainstream program, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Oh, well, that's okay with that. Circle left, there's a storm across the valley. All the clouds are drifting in. Left alley man, do sado. Hey, the men star left inside, you know. Turn your partner by the right hand and go. Alley man left, come back and promenade. And hey, it's good to be back home again. Head square through to 4. Who took the first beat? They did. Swing through. Boys run and a couple circulate. Ladies chain down the line, you see. Star through and then pass through and trade by. Swing that corner. Promenade, I'll tell you why. Now the Glee Club. Hey, it's good to be back home. Now, I'll take the first beat for myself. Same figure, we'll dance entirely different. Head square through. Notice how they had to wait at home because I wasn't letting them dance the music. Swing through. couples circulate. Ladies chain down the line. Not much difference, but just a little bit. Star through, pass through, and trade by swing. Promenade around a ring, back home again. Now they're not back home in time, are they? Circle left, there's the storm. You see the difference? Thank you. You can just stop right there. Which felt better to you guys? When I gave you the first beat, didn't it? It felt a lot better and it danced a lot better. Is that hard for me to do? Not with singing calls, generally speaking. You saw I could do that very easily with the same figure, and it sounds pretty much the same, but it dances differently. Square your sets just where you are again for just a second. Put a pattern on there. One of the things that I like to do once the dancers have learned a couple of moves, and the only moves we're going to do are ladies' chains, right and left throughs, and promenade halves. Nobody's going to have trouble with those, right? Okay. Yeah, right. You said, is he going to try to trick us again? Okay. Head ladies chain. Chain her back. Side ladies chain. Chain her back. Heads promenade outside halfway. Right or left tube and turn your suit. Sides promenade outside halfway. Right or left tube and turn your suit. Now, no problem with that. Feels relatively smooth, doesn't it? We're talking about how we... Leave it running, Larry. We're talking about how we get the dancers to feel the body flow. Watch the difference, just a little sequence change in how I present those same calls. Head ladies chain, 1, 2. Head couples promenade outside. They flow right into it. Down the middle with a right or left do and turn your suit. Same ladies chain the girl you do. Side ladies chain, I said. Sides promenade outside. Down the middle with a right or left do and turn your suit. Same ladies chain across the town. Okay, now you left it. Which danced better? The second one didn't, did it? The second danced better because there was a flow to the traffic pattern. The head ladies chain over and across, the heads and the sides over and across, the heads promenade half, right and left through. That's fine. That's reasonable flow. But the other, as they do the courtesy turn, you teach the body flow and the flowing move into the half promenade. And that's what we're talking about, how we teach the dancers to feel the flow of the figure, to feel the flow of the music. There was a recent singing call that just came out. John Jones and his son Vernon called it. It has a neat figure in it. Head ladies turn through. Star through and half promenade. Nice combination, isn't it? Flutter wheel. Sweep a quarter. Pass through and a right and a left through. But veer left. And a couple circulate. Ladies chain down the line, keep her in promenade real short, don't bother to go all the way. That combination has a beautiful flow to it when you dance it with any kind of music that you want. It doesn't make any difference whether we dance this to patter or we dance this to singing call music, but the point being that the figure itself has a flow to it. The head ladies turn through and the star through to a half promenade. That's different, isn't it? Not complex, not difficult, but it feels different because it's a little bit unusual. This is the record that John and his son Vernon called. It's called Let Me Be There. Circle, let me be there in your morning. Let me be there in your night. Left alley man, no sando. All the men star left tonight. Turn partner by the right hand and go. Left alley man and we'll all promenade. All I ask is you, let me be there. Head ladies turn to. Star through, half promenade outside. go halfway, you see. Flutter wheel across, sweep 1/4, pass to right or left, do you see? Veer left and a couple circulate. Ladies chain down the line, keep her and all promenade. Isn't that a nice flowing figure? And if we could do that sort of thing with the dancers. Now, let it go there. Here's another figure. Heads right and left do. Sides right and left do. And the heads square through 4. Here's what you hear. Do a do, sa, do. 8 chain 4. How many of you heard that in the singing call? Watch the action of the one who finishes the Curtis turn. Swing that corner, promenade. All I ask of you is let me be there. Now, same thing, slightly different. Heads right and left do. Sides right and left do. But the heads square through 4. Do an 8 chain 5. Watch the action now, slightly different. 4, 5, Alaman left. Come back 1, swing and promenade. Oh. He did that on purpose to see if I was watching. You know that, don't you? Which felt better, the 8 do-sa-do, 8 chain 4 and swing, or the 8 chain 5, Alaman left and come back and swing?
8 chain 5.
8 chain 5. What are all the singing calls written as? Do-sa-do and 8 chain 4. Why do we do that? Well, when you call that particular record, by the way, give these dancers a big hand. You did everything I wanted to. I appreciate that.
Timing difference, though, in that extra...
No timing difference. If you do a do-sa-do 8 chain 4, it times exactly as an 8 chain 5 Alaman left, and depending upon the dancers moving to the music, you either swing or you don't swing, but they take that girl and promenade. And that's what's important for you to understand in class timing, in club calling, or whatever. You want to make sure that you understand the body flow that we're asking the dancers to do. Yes, sir. Please, get it on the tape. Okay?
So many dancers are not doing a courtesy turn on the outside.
Well, we have to teach them to dance correctly. And the problem is, I didn't really think about this too much until a dancer said, I'm not going to dance that figure, John. That's terrible when I have to do that courtesy turn the outside, which is a left-hand turn for me, and now you want me to swing a girl, which is to the right? He says, I got a hernia problem with that one. And it's true. We ask the dancers to totally reverse directions sometimes, and it's just bad calling. Jim Mayo makes the comment, I can teach anything but bad calling. And if you think about that, when we are calling and we are teaching, we should be teaching the dancers to feel the flow. And it's incumbent upon us not only to select the material, but to deliver it with timing so that it feels good for the dancer. And I think this is sometimes a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to sometimes get callers to truly believe it. But I think by dancing it and by talking to the people who dance it, or if you dance it yourself, you'll see the differences in the callers. And the callers who have good timing, the dancers don't tap their watch and say, is this thing still running? They say, my gosh, is it 10:15 already? And which would you rather have? Is it 10:15 already? And I think it's a tough thing to do. Now, in patter calling, we as callers frequently take the first beat for ourselves. When we do that, we're being selfish. It's easier for us to call when we use the first beat. I don't question that at all. But it's a different dance experience for the dancer if I let the dancers dance to the musical phrase. Can it be done? I think you all saw it. It can be done, but it takes hard work on the part of the caller to make it work. When good timing is there, and a little later on we'll come up and I'll show you some examples of correct timing to different records and incorrect timing, and there will be less than a half a second difference in when I give that call. But the dancing will be entirely different. And those of you who are dancing will feel it and say, that was awful. And those of you who are watching will say, don't they look funny? Because there are going to be some stop and go. Larry?
Okay, so that's the kinds of things that certainly should be part of what we practice with the dancers as we move through that. And your opportunity to do that kind of practice, obviously, is with that material which the dancers are most familiar with as you move through the class time. And that's part of the judgment you have to use as you're going through the teaching experience as to when to use some of these things. And some of the things we have to keep in mind for judgment are some of that I'd just like to mention briefly as some of the types of things you have to keep in mind as you're preparing for your class program to work with. Obviously, you have to prepare yourself for knowing the definitions. You have to prepare yourself for knowing the timing lists. You have to prepare yourself for the selection of material you're going to use. You're going to start off with a fair amount of repetition as you're teaching new material. If you never deviate from that repetition as you're teaching new material, your dancers are never going to grow as dancers in that class situation. So you have to think in terms of variety. When you start with easier patterns for your first teach, for your initial learning, as they get comfortable, you should be able to start varying the arrangements, the formations that you're using with some of this stuff. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. I think everybody here certainly should be familiar with what a formation is. A formation, you've either got a circle or a static square or parallel waves or lines or all the other formations that are part of there's a list that's available through CALLERLAB, which are the common formations, and go through all of the various ones. You need to be aware of arrangements in terms of the dancers. Where are the boys? Where are the girls in that formation? If you've got a static square with the normal couples at home, you know you have boy-girl arrangements, and you've got the boy on the left and the girl on the right. If you start them to circle left, you still got that same kind of arrangement. If you've got ocean waves with the boys on the outside and the girls in the middle, or you have two boys on the left, two girls on the right, or boys facing out and girls facing in, all those are arrangements. And you have to think about how you're going to apply those to your class situation, and you have to think about what effect you're going to have in terms of your thinking about timing issues with regard to how are you going to deal with that. What I mean by that is that you're going to start off with something fairly standard. The first time you get dancers into an ocean wave, for instance, you're going to basically go from facing couples into an ocean wave. You're going to have a normal ocean wave with the boys on the outside and the girls in the middle. And you start to teach them things like swing through, half by the right, half by the left, that type of thing. You don't have to tell them that that's a standard arrangement. You don't have to tell them that the boys are on the end of that ocean wave and the girls are on the center of that ocean wave. They're going to figure that out pretty quickly themselves. And what you're going to have before you know it, even without having gone too far, is they've developed a standard arrangement, because you always call a swing through from the boys on the outside and the girls in the middle. So part of your class situation, what's going to happen from a timing point of view, if you have your dancers dancing around and you do head square through 4, do-si-do, swing through, you can expect that to be fairly comfortable. If you do head square through 4, do-si-do, touch a quarter, centers trade, now all of a sudden you don't have ocean waves. One of the examples when we get a square up later, I just want to use that as an example just to show you the effect. But now all of a sudden you don't have ocean waves where the boys are on the outside and the girls in the middle. What do you have? Well, if you think about it, you had facing couples, you do a touch a quarter, you have all the boys facing in, you got the centers trade, you get all the boys together on one side and all the girls together on the other side. So for some of those dancers, for one of those boys, he's on the end, that feels like a normal wave. For one of those boys who's in the center, it's no longer a normal wave. One girl on the end, that's not normal for her, because from that standard position they've already developed the other girl in the center. And so when you call a swing through there, it's going to feel a little differently. If you haven't taken the time to let your dancers feel that during your classing experience, but then you come upon that in your calling and you're not taking that into account, you're going to see your floor, you're going to see your new dancers hesitate. And if you are thinking, okay, here's where I'm getting away from the stop and go kind of timing, but I want to push it a little bit so that they start to feel the dance, and then all of a sudden they go down in defeat because of that. You've got to understand why, and your teaching experience, what you do as a teacher, you have to take those kinds of things into account. So again, you can move your new dancers through this. You start with a fairly standard position. You move to some other arrangements within that. You broaden your dancer's experience. You take the time to practice timing with your dancers at the same time that you're practicing new moves. And what you're going to find is you're going to have a floor of dancers that dances a lot smoother. You have some dancers come in from another club or class somewhere that aren't quite being exposed to it the same way, and they're going to take a look at your floor and say, gee, you've got a real sharp class there. I mean, those are really good new dancers. And are they any different from any other set of new dancers that somebody else has over in another club here, there, or somewhere else? Probably not, but if you've approached your teaching in that way and you've kept this as one of the factors that you're going to keep in mind as you keep everything else in mind, they're going to look like they're really sharp dancers just because their teaching experience has been a little bit broader and they're a little bit better teacher in that way. Other kinds of things that you think about, we'll talk a little bit. Again, this is a timing session, but you can't separate timing from choreographic flow, and so things such as good flow and overflow. And I think
this ends the front side of the cassette. Please turn it over and begin again.
We can take a peek at that when we've got
True
a square
story.
in.
I was doing some choreography one time with a DVD group on Plus, and if you stop to think of the movements that we have to use in the mainstream and Plus, most of the moves are right-handed action. And if we do too many of them without some left-handed turn, we're going to screw them into the ground. True story. I was calling, and I had done one of these round and round, and this cute young thing said, "You've screwed me into the ground, would you please unscrew me?" Sometimes you're not ready for what the dancers tell you, I got to tell you.
What was your comeback?
My comeback was, yeah, right. But the point being, we will do things sometimes as callers that we really don't think about. And we will do action as the example I gave of the head square through, swing through, boys run, couple circulate, wheel and deal, pass through, trade by. It's fine for the heads, but it's not so fine for the sides. And we have to analyze the material that we're using in class as well as in club to make sure that the inactives also have good body flow. Now, tonight there's going to be a dance at 9 o'clock down at Plaza del Oreo. It's going to be 7 callers, and we're supposed to all call standard applications. Larry, hold up your book there. How many of you have this book of the standard applications for mainstream? It should be your Bible. That's what you should teach, all of the standard applications first.
Available for a small cost from the CALLERLAB office?
It includes the definitions, which includes the formations from which you can start. It includes ending formations. It includes timing. And it's really something that you all should be inherently familiar with for any program that you wish to call, whether it's Mainstream Plus or what have you. Have we completed that for the advanced? No, we have not. Do we have timing for the advanced program? The answer is yes. We don't have standard applications, even though they exist out there. We just haven't recorded those in writing yet. But you want to try to think about those things as you're teaching especially. And if we keep in mind that we teach the dancers how to feel the body flow, and we practice that in our calling, as Larry says, you're going to have people who have the reputation of being, they're good dancers. There's nothing that is more thrilling to a caller than to have someone dance with a new dancer and said, oh, he must have learned from Larry. That's the greatest compliment the dancer can give to the person who taught them, is to reflect proper dancing techniques. And that happens when you've done a good job in teaching with proper timing and the feel of the dance and the flow of the dance.
Okay, so I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the standard applications thing. The standard applications certainly are the formations and arrangements that most dancers are going to experience on most floors most of the time. Is that a proper most statement? I don't know. Anyway, mostly. What's in there, though, part of the variety that you can play with are applications that are other than the standard. There's information in that book which will give you guidance to think about how to use some of these things. Just because an application is called not standard does not mean it's not danceable or not smooth dancing. Mostly it means that the dancer is not familiar with it. Coming back to a timing tie-in, if dancers are not as familiar with the material, they're going to hesitate and they're not going to get through it as smoothly if you don't adjust to help them through it. You can take into account these applications, and I think that they're part of what you need to do as your preparation for teaching class, is that you need to know what the standard applications are. I think you need to start with the standard applications because those are going to serve the dancer best in the front. As they become more familiar with that, I think you should move and explore some of this other material. It's another sense of broadening the dancing experience for these people. So what is the benefit to the dancer of these standard applications? They're going to find when they hit a square dance floor, if this is what they know, that they're going to have a fair amount of success. If they will be learning these formations and arrangements, as I said, used by most dancers, and these certainly should be first, but if you move on into some non-standard applications, again, you strengthen the skills of the newer dancer. You allow them to become comfortable with a broader range of choreography that they might run into on a square dance floor, so when they hit the street running or hit the dance floor dancing, it's just going to be a more enjoyable experience for them. Don't add them too soon or too much, because one of the other things that's going to frustrate dancers in a new class is if you throw too much at them right away, they're not going to get anything down well. They're going to get a lot of things down not so well. And when they're out of the comfort zone of the class that they've been learning in and move into the wider world of square dancing, their frustration level might be such that we lose them as dancers. This isn't a recruiting session, but we all know that, first of all, it's hard enough to get people into class. The second thing is it's hard enough to keep them to stay into class. And the third thing we know, it's hard enough to get them through the transition from class into club without moving into that kind of frustration level. So anything you can do to tie all these kind of skills together are certainly going to help there. Some other things to think about as you are moving through your preparation for calling a class. Again, your selection of material, we've talked about that a little bit, easier patterns, variety as they get comfortable with it. You need to be in mind of your flow, because you want dancers to get used to dancing to good music and good dancing. Dancers that only know bad calling don't know what dancing is. And you can solve that problem in your class right from the beginning. Let them know what good dancing is from the beginning. Think in terms some things to think about with regard to difficulty of material. Familiarity with calls affects how much time new dancers need. Comes back to not changing the execution time that John talked about earlier in what you're doing, but you may want to adjust for some of the newer material that they're not quite as comfortable with yet. You may want to adjust how soon do you give the command so they have plenty of time to be aware of what's coming. If it's really early in the class kind of a setting for learning this new material, it comes back to maybe you do want to give them a little bit more execution time. That comes back into not really stop and go. It's just adjusting the execution time for the comfort of the dancer to learn. Different choreographic flow, then, as we talked about, does affect the timing, and you have to know that. Dancers who are learning need more time to think about things. Dancers who are familiar with the material can relax and simply move through it. If your choreographic flow is good, your dancers are going to have an easier time to see what's coming. If they expect to turn left because of where they are in the flow that you've given them, and you give them another right, and it comes back to that lurch recover kind of a thing, that's not comfortable for the dancer, and it's also going to play havoc on your being able to call a well-timed dance. Harder to dance, bad flow. And dancers who learn to dance to bad flow with bad timing develop bad habits. don't learn to dance and don't learn to enjoy the dance, and guess what? They're probably not going to stick around and be square dancers. Last thing I want to mention at this point, and then maybe move to a square for a little bit. You've got to, when you go through all these things that I've been talking about, you think about all these different types of preparations that you have to keep in mind. You have to also remember that another key ingredient when you're calling class is your judgment. Appropriate judgment of your class, appropriate judgment of their abilities, their learning rates on a given evening. Is it too hot? Are they eager and alert? Is it a full moon? Is the full moon happen to everybody else?
Yep.
Yeah, it's real. And you also have to think in terms of using judgment in your preparation. I learned this one from somebody back in Pocono Pines, Pennsylvania, called an old adage. I think that's the right word for it. There are 3 dances that you've got to keep in mind for any time you call. And this isn't just whether it's class or whether you're going out to call your club dance, but there are 3 dances you have to keep in mind. There's the dance you prepared for, there's the dance you did call, and there's the dance you should have called. And you gotta keep
there's the dance your partner told you to call in the first place.
I forgot that one. So you have to be flexible. You have to use good judgment. You have to adjust to the conditions you've got. And you've got to be a variety of things at different points in the class setting so that you're giving your dancers the best shot to learn what it means to be a square dancer, how to dance well, and how to enjoy the activity. And I think that you put that together correct, and your success rate of who's going to make it from class to club would probably go up. I think, can we get a square up and just show a few things that border on some of this? And old favorite. Now this again is not a teaching session, but just to demonstrate a little bit. Probably the first thing that a lot of people do on a first night, you might try a big circle or a little circle or whatnot, but circle left certainly works, but that's your first chance to let people know what's going on, because you can start to give them some directions right away. Everybody join hands one ring. Circle to the left, move to the music, step to the beat, listen to the beat. 1 foot, just move to the beat. Circle to the right, go the other way, back. Stop when you get back home. Stop right there. So, if you think about it, you're doing a couple things there. You're teaching them how to circle, but do you really have to teach them how to circle? Yeah, maybe you do. But if you tell somebody to join hands and start walking to the left, you know they're going to do the basic circle. But are they going to start dancing right away? No, you can start that from the very beginning. Other things that you want to keep in mind at the same time is don't forget styling from the first point. And when you tell people to join hands in that circle, join hands if you would, and take a look at where your hands are. Are all the men's, let's make sure I get it right, are all the men's palms up and the ladies' palms down? And we all know that, so we don't have to fight too hard as to what's going on. So you can start to deal with some of these kind of things. I think the point I want to make here is when you've got a call like circle where you can think about these types of things, you have to think about, well, how do you hold the hand? How do you move your feet to the music? Is it a nice shuffle, a sliding motion, or whatnot? You've got time to concentrate on that at this point because you really don't have to concentrate on what's the definition of a circle. But what I'd like to leave you with on that particular one is when you start to think about square through or something of greater complexity, you start to get wrapped up in the mechanics of, so how do you do the call? Do you remember to come back and think in terms of how many beats of music, what's the proper styling, some of that other stuff? That's where you've got to discipline yourself to sort of keep those other pieces in mind, where the call is taking more time to teach and you start to forget about some of the other kinds of things you're thinking about there. One of the other things I want is to talk about styling a little bit, is how it has an effect too. Let's have the, go ahead, head, square through 4. Let's see what happens here. Do side with the one you meet. Some of you almost leaned into an ocean wave. Some of you didn't. And you know, that also has an effect on timing, for instance. Just to show you what I mean, this time go ahead and do what you see an awful lot of dancers do. Do, si, do. Star through. Now, you can actually, you know, you've got the hand held there, and you can go ahead and complete the move, but how many dancers, if they've already overreacted, gone beyond the do-si-do and moved into the, gone into the ocean wave at that point? Thank you, whoever said wave. You've got a problem with the next call, because if you're thinking, I want a do-si-do, and I'm not going to do a do-si-do to a swing through, but I'm going to do a do-si-do to something else that doesn't require an ocean wave, you've caused a hitch in the giddy up there that you've got to deal with. And one way to deal with that is, again, proper teaching of not only the definition, but reinforcing that. The worst thing you've got on the floor with a lot of angels out there is you've got to reteach angels that a do-si-do does not have an ending formation of an ocean wave. Which brings back to another point. Every time you're teaching something, you need to point out to a dancer, this is where you're starting from, this is where you're ending, so that they can get that idea. All right. While we're up here, I'd said that I wanted to talk a little bit about arrangements and formations that you can play with. I don't remember, let's see, where did I have you all? Oh, heck, I didn't look at anybody. Why don't you just reform your square? Why, hey, they were still in the same spot. I also know who belonged in the square. Head square through 4 hands. Step to an ocean wave. So here's your standard wave that you're all going to start with when you do a swing through and teach that. You've got the boys on the outside and the girls in the middle. And you may do things like swing through, half right, boys trade. You know, no, don't do it again, because in a class situation, that was just the helper words to sort of tell you what you were going to do. Or you could say swing through, half right, half left. All right. Now that second one is probably the second one that you're going to come around to teach, and so your dancers may know pretty well if they're on the outside and in the center, they can dance that part if it's the same sex on the outside or the same sex in the center. But all of a sudden they start to think of swing through even becoming a sex-dependent call. If I'm not turning with another, if I'm not in the same sex in the center, I must not quite be where I'm supposed to be. The next thing is that you also got to take the time to let dancers know when you're doing this kind of a call that only when you start off in a right-handed wave, everybody can make a right-hand turn, but can everybody make the left-hand turn? Newer dancers need to be told that, because they get a little nervous if they're standing around, don't have anything to do, and all that thing comes back into their understanding of the call, and it all comes back again into their understanding of being able to do the call well-timed, and it all comes back into whether the caller is be able to move that. But the other things that you need to be able to do is let people be more comfortable with something that's just a little bit stranger. Everybody's single hinge, center's trade. We have a new ocean wave. It's going to be a little different. To a newer dancer, you're going to say, you're going to do this. To here, nobody's going to have a problem. If these folks could think like newer dancers, what you're going to see is they're all going to say, I'm not quite sure I'm supposed to go. But you need to practice this kind of material. Swing through. Single hinge. New center's trade. Swing through right here. Single hinge. Now what happens if I hesitated here, and it's not going to work too bad if I do this, swing through. Does it feel as good though if I do this? Single hinge, swing through. So it comes back to you've got to keep body flow in mind as well, because that kind of thing that doesn't feel comfortable is going to get in the way with your dancers moving through that figure smoothly. And you need to, as you're thinking about this, you're going to have to think about how to straighten out some of that stuff. Single hinge, center's trade, swing through. They weren't ready. They didn't know I was saying another call out there. Now what you saw that time, we'll just break it down one piece. You know, it's single hinge, that they're doing something with the right hand. Center's trade, those dancers are moving comfortably because it's with their left hand. They're expecting to go that way. At this point now, swing through, and everybody just hits a right hand to starting, and it feels comfortable. What happens if you just do the other one? Single hinge, that's a right hand. Swing through, that's another right hand. And it just doesn't feel quite as good. All right. One other thing I wanted to point out here in terms of different arrangements that you've got to think about. Let's have single hinge at this point. Center's trade. Swing through right here. Girls do U-turn back. Not worrying about whether that was good or bad. That wasn't the example. Everybody do a right and left through. No problem. You're working with the one dancer across from you, and if you're in a static square and you were just doing heads right and left through or sides right and left through, that's no problem. Everybody do a right and left through one more time. But if you do this one without telling your dancers what's going on, you're going to find that it's going to be just a tad more difficult. These folks shouldn't have a problem. Everybody slide through. Do a right and left through with the ones you found. Now, they've all learned how to dance that thing, and it's not really a problem. And for the dancers on the inside moving towards the outside, they don't see anybody else in their square, so to finish that courtesy turn is not a problem. But dancers coming into the middle almost think that they're going to do something else with another dancer coming into the middle. How many of you experience when you get to this 8-chain 4 formation and do a right and left through with the dancers on the outside sort of get mixed up as to who the heck they're supposed to courtesy turn with when they get into the middle? You've got to take those things into account as you think about this. It messes up the flow, messes up the timing, but there's nothing wrong with that one. This is not a case where you have a problem in terms of space in the middle. Do a right and left through from here one more time. There's enough room in there, but you have to take these into account. And when you get to that last tip of the evening, for instance, where you're just playing with your dancers and you're thinking in terms of timing and whatnot, if all you've done was right and left through from static squares or right and left through from facing lines, and you throw this in the middle while you're trying to smooth time a tip, it's not going to work. You need to anticipate that kind of stuff. John, do you want to do something with them at this point, or let them rest, or say something else and I'll come back?
Yes, put that chicken button. One of the other things that, if I called from here, star through, everybody. If I called a star through, everybody star through, and tonight, dive through, how does that feel? Yeah. Okay, centers pass through, everybody slide through. I have heard callers do this. Everybody slide through, dive through. That's even worse, isn't it? Why? Because the dancers didn't have that security blanket of the handhold. We have a good call. It's called pass to the center. Why don't we use it? Callers' lack of discipline. Callers' lack of discipline. And I say that from the standpoint that callers are lazy. All of us are. How many of you want to plead guilty to that besides me? Thank you. It's nice to see reinforcement, whatever the cost. The point being that if we have a slide-through, where are the boys going as we analyze that call? They're moving to the outside. Let them go to the outside and call a pass to the center. And the reason we don't do it is that we have to discipline ourselves, pass to the center in 2 beats, pass to the center. And if we haven't disciplined ourselves in the command time of a 2-beat delivery, we don't use it, and we don't feel comfortable with it. Centers pass through. Oh, star through. Right and left through. Ladies lead Dixie style to an ocean wave. What call do you want to use after you do this? You betcha. I've heard callers say left swing through. Guess what happens? Those guys in the center have already started their trade because that felt right. And that's what the body wants to do. It wants to alternate hands and go the way the body is tending to move. There's a law of physics called that a mass in motion tends to remain in motion. Some of us have a larger mass than others, okay? Well, just let it go that way. How would that be okay with everybody? The point being that if we don't let the boys trade or the centers trade, we're asking for a breakdown, aren't we? Okay? Boys trade. Do a left swing through. We going to have any trouble with a left swing through if we call it that way? Not at all. Girls run, and what have we done? We have normalized, that is, we've put the girl on the boy's right, the formation and the arrangement. Couples circulate and bend your line. Now, if I wanted to do the Dixie style in a left swing through, how can I smooth that out? Right and left through. Ladies lead Dixie style. and balance. That's one way. Or I could say boys trade twice to a left swing through. That's marginal as to being overflow. Please understand that, because that's a 360-degree turn. All the girls circulate and all the boys circulate, and all the girls run around the boys and promenade back home. You're close, right? That's who you started with? Sideways chain? Yeah, we're right at the sideways chain end. Okay. put that on there. I want to just do a couple of examples of correct timing and incorrect timing, and we'll show you a couple of different ways in which it's incorrect, and I want you to realize it. Heads square through 4. When should I give the command to swing through? Swing through. Right about there, just about a step before. Boys run. They had to stop. Couples circulate. Ladies, you chain down the line. Star through right here. Pass through and trade by. Element left. Square your sets. Sides right and left through. Square through to 4. Swing through with the outside 2. Wait till they finish their square through there, will you, honey? No, but you see, he had to do 4 hands, and you only let him do 2. I know, those short naps are marvelous, aren't they? Now, what I'm trying to get at is, what did I do there? I made the dancers stack the calls, which is going to get them to rush, or I clipped the timing. I didn't give them enough time. Now the boys run around the girl, and a couple circulate this way. Gonna bend your line, or right or left do. Ladies lead to a Dixie style. Boys cross fold. Star through right here. Circle up 8-8 that way. Element left. Promenade your girl around the ring and to get along home and to hear me sing. Sides square through to 4. Swing through. It was a half a beat late. That's less than a half a second. But they had to stop. Spin your top. Spin your top again. Don't forget to move up, girls. Swing through, go here and there. And the boys run around the girl, and the boys trade. And the couples circulate this way. Ferris wheel, just like that. Square through in the middle, and they count about 3. Do a do-sa-do right here. You do go all the way around, and you make a little wave, and the girls trade. Swing through, and then the boys trade. Boys run around the girl, and a couple circulate once and a half. Bend, it should be home. Sides right or left do. Do a half sachet, and the head square through to 4. Those short naps are marvelous. Touch 1/4 there. This is what Larry's talking about. Different formation or different arrangement is still a wave. Centers trade, scoot back. Boys run around the girl, and then a right or left do with a turn, my friend. Past the ocean here. Single hinge and centers trade. Do a single hinge, new centers trade, and boys run around the girl and a right or left do. Okay, what we've done there, we've given you several different waves, arrangements, but we've danced them in such a way that the dancers don't even think about it, because it wasn't difficult, it was different. And that's what we should be dealing with our classes and in our clubs. Different, but not difficult. Dancers don't need complexity. Callers need complexity. Dancers are not bored. Callers are boring. There is a difference in those two statements, and please understand it. Dancers are not bored. Callers are boring. And I truly believe that. I think that if we were to study the mainstream and see what we could do with it, we wouldn't need quarterly selections, we wouldn't need plus, and we wouldn't need advanced, and we wouldn't need any of these other programs, because there's lots of material there for the dancers to use. Didn't these guys do a nice job as dancers? Okay.
This doesn't need a square, but just one other thing about timing. When you start thinking that you're really paying attention to timing, there are little things that can sort of get in your way to sort of surprise you, and you find that you weren't paying attention as much as possible. How much time do you give dancers to do a forward and back? 4? 4?
Sometimes you're lucky if you get 4. What is forward and back used by many, many callers? What is it used for? No. It's like caller saying to himself, what in the world am I going to call next? They say go forward and back. They really don't mean it because they immediately give a right and left through thereafter. What does it say in the book of how long it should take to do a forward and back? Try 8.
8. 3 steps.
Forward, 2, 3, touch, back, 2, 3, touch. How many of you always give the dancers 8 steps in the forward and back? Raise your hand.
I work on it, and I still violate it occasionally.
Yeah, I think we all violate it from time to time. But if I could get callers to at least give the dancers 4 beats, I would feel that was a major accomplishment. Yes, get please with the microphone, Rick. Rick, please wake up, Rick. Rick.
Joyce Gabor, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Don't you find that the dancers, though, often do the forward and back and 4?
Only the first tip until they realize how much time I'm going to live them, because they're going to stand there for 4 beats.
No, but I mean, I find a lot of times the dancers only use 4 beats.
Very much so, but this comes back to what we can do in our class situation.
Right,
if you teach them that a forward and back is step 2, 3, touch, back 2, 3, touch, and you use it that way. But if you teach it that way and you tell your dancer, it's 8 beats, here's how it goes, and the first thing you do, you put the needle down and said, heads, go forward and back, do a right and left through.
Or what's worse, another thing I would like to see dancers do, when the caller says forward and back or right and left through, a whole bunch of the dancers say, we're not through yet. Wouldn't that be marvelous?
What I was going to say was that you can teach the dancers to do it in 8 beats, but then when they get out and they dance to some callers that haven't allowed them for 8 beats, they start picking up bad habits.
Sure, that's an education problem.
Why do anybody know why dancers do a waist swing do-si-do in the middle of a grand square? Or they swing when they get back home? Because the caller has screwed up the timing. The caller has missed the timing. In the first place, a grand square should always be delivered on the musical phrase on beats 7 and 8, sides, face, grand square, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Sides, face, grand square. Boom, the dancer gets the first step. When do the callers give the next command? They probably give it on beat 33, which is 2 beats too late, isn't it? So the dancers say, if he's not going to let me start with the music, I'm going to do something else in there. And they're going to figure out a way to fill the time.
And once you've taught them that bad habit, then what happens is you give them the 32 beats that they're supposed to have, and you give them proper command time and the whole bit, and then they're trying to see how fast they can do a grand square to make sure they get that bad habit in that they learned. So it's.
Yeah. But the other thing is partially an answer to your question. If I go to call for a club that I haven't called for before, and I call head square through 4, swing through, and I just hesitate or cough or pretend I've got a bug in my mouth, I look to see whether the boys trade, the boys run, or the couples do a spin the top. I can pretty much tell what kind of a dance I'm going to have that evening because of the way the dancers have been trained. Did it ever happen to any of you when you were out to guest call that you called something and suddenly they were doing something that you hadn't called yet and you knew that's the only way their caller ever called it? This is what happens to dancers today. The callers don't use variety. I don't care whether they use complexity. I do care. I would rather they not use complexity, but I want them at least to use variety so that the dancer knows who is in control of that dance. At the first tip, if the dancers do a forward and back and 4 beats and I'm giving them 8, by the end of that tip, if they see that I've given them time to dance it, they're going to dance my way for the rest of the night because they know that I'll give them the time and they can trust me. If, on the other hand, you go in and you go to a dance caller that you haven't danced before and he doesn't give you that time, you've got to figure out what he's going to give you and you'll shortcut to try to smooth out what he's made rough. I'll say that again. You as a dancer will try to shortcut so that you can smooth out what that caller has messed up. I really believe it. Get on the microphone, Bill. Please. You know me better than that.
You know, the first grand square that I teach is one that I put in a singing call many years ago, which was head square through 4 sides face grand square. Now, I know that my sides are going to do it right or else get run over. So I teach this is my first teach, because all you have to do on this is have the heads cloverleaf, down the middle, pass through cloverleaf again, walk in and square through 3 and swing the corner. And if they get in the way, they're dead.
Yep.
So they learn real quick to take all the beats of music and now turn around and do it the other way, side space, then stick it in the grand square, stick it in singing call. It works very beautiful in the singing call. Yeah.
That's very true. Everybody understand that point that Bill Stone's making is that if you do that, you can modify some of these calls. And the point that Larry and I are trying to make today is that you don't need a great deal of complexity to make dancing fun and smooth. You don't need a great deal of variety to make it different. You should do it somewhat differently, but you shouldn't make it complexity. And I guess the message in all of this is that if we have the proper tempo and we have the proper timing, and we showed you examples of good timing and just a little bit off, and the timing difference is very, very slight. At 120 beats a minute, that's 2 beats for every second. That means each beat is only a half a second. If you're only 1 beat off, how far are you off? Not very far. And you saw the effect that it had on the dancers. They had to stop, and it was uncomfortable. And if our calling makes the dancers uncomfortable, then we have failed our job as callers and entertainers. We really have. Is timing difficult to do? Good timing? Yeah. But is it worth it? The answer is yeah. And the dancers will love you for it. Believe me, they will love you for it. Any other questions that any of you might have? We have a roving microphone. We have just about another 6 or 7 minutes or so before we're going to wrap it up.
Larry, somehow earlier you started talking about the 3 stages of the evening, and I got the first stage, which was the first tip, and somehow I missed the second and third stages.
Oh, okay. What I was saying in terms of programming the tip, what I would normally do is I would use the first tip as a warm-up. They're coming in the door. If I've got a full 2-hour session, I might use the first 2 tips, a little bit of warm-up and also some review of what they've seen in the recent weeks, and there might be a little bit of workshop associated with that. I wouldn't do a new move in that first tip or 2 tips. Then I would use the next tip or whatever's in between for new teach. And the last tip or 2 of the evening, I would just let them relax and dance, and I would revert to some of the material they're more familiar with so that we can spend time on the timing and the dancing as opposed to having them stumble through stuff they just learned so that they can start to see what it's like to be square dancing instead of square walking.
Let me make another comment. It's on teaching more than on timing. How many of you think that you have enough time to teach the dancers how to dance? Do your clubs give you enough time? Okay. How many of you would like to figure out a way to have more time to give the dancers practice teaching, practice learning? Let me suggest that once the dancers have done a right and a left grand a number of times, they don't need that every sequence. Once the dancers know how to do a promenade, they don't need that every sequence. How long does it take to do a full promenade? 16 beats, right? How long is that in seconds if we're dancing at 120 beats a minute? Would someone close those back door, please, for me? How long does it take to do 16 beats at 120? 8 seconds. How long does it take to do a right and left grand and swing and promenade? Again, we're only talking 8 seconds, but if we count up the total number of 8 seconds, we can extend our teaching time or our dance practice time by 2 or 3 minutes in a tip, because we've cut out the unnecessary right and left grands and the unnecessary promenades. Many callers in today's environment try to show the dancers how smart they are by ending their routines, "You're home." And if you've called over in Europe, and as those kids did this morning, you end up with a routine at home and you hear a clap, clap, clap. And that's kind of nice. And that's a very effective way of doing your teaching and your calling to take advantage of additional dance time. Now, that's a teaching technique, to be sure, rather than a timing thing, but it's a part of the learning process. And that's what we're talking about here, is timing and flow and learning and the rate of learning that Larry was talking about. All of your dancers aren't going to learn at the same rate of speed, are they? Some are going to require more emphasis. But how many times do we have to dance a promenade or a right and left grand before we know how to do it? And I would urge you to think about having a lot of routines that end at home. And we need to work on our command time, our lead time, and our execution time. You know, do you need an electronic timer to see how fast your record is moving? Maybe not, but it's a good help if you haven't calibrated your ears recently and you don't know inherently that that speed is 128 beats per minute or 126 beats per minute. It's interesting. We were over in Australia for the mini-lab in 1988, and the callers were saying, our dancers won't let us slow down the records. They want to dance that fast. Am I pretty close to being right there, my Australian friend? Okay. The dancers, the callers say the dancers won't let us slow down. And after we did our mini-lab over there, we had a benefit dance in Brisbane, and the callers were John Jones, Jack Lasry, Ernie Kinney, Jim Mayo, and me. And we had our tempo at about 126 to 128. And the dancers, to a person, said, we love your tempo. Can't you get our callers to slow down? Now, you kind of wonder sometimes, who's telling the truth, the dancers or the callers? The callers saying the dancers won't let us slow it down, and the dancers saying, can't you get our callers to slow down? I really don't know what tempo they're dancing at now, but when we left them in 1988, we said, see if you can get your callers, see if you can call no faster than 130 for the next few years, and see if that doesn't improve the styling and the smoothness of your dancing. It really will work, especially if you're dancing in a hot, sticky floor or on carpet. Slow down your tempo just a tad. Your timing doesn't have to change. That's based upon the number of beats that you're giving the dancers. 2 beats for the command time, 2 to 4 beats for lead time, and the execution time. Your dancing will smooth out. Your choreography will be better. The dancing experience will be considerably better. Would like to thank all of you for coming this afternoon, and I'd also like to express my appreciation to Larry Davenport, the Fink. Thank you for attending. Appreciate you being here.